Hello, I'm Remington. Welcome. So June is a wrap, and I wanted to just quickly talk about all the books that I read last month. I just want to do a quick poll real quick. Do you like the smooth jazz that I'm putting in the videos or not? If you don't like it, I'll cut them out. I'm kind of partial to it, but again, I'm not the audience of the videos, I'm the maker. So if you have a preference, please let me know. And if not, enjoy the video. I read a lot of books, but most of them were fairly short, so it was a pretty typical month for me, honestly. The first book I read was Letters to a Young Contrarian by Christopher Hitchens. And this book, honestly, I feel like I need to revisit it in 10 years to fully appreciate it. Hitchens quotes quite a bit from different historical events and different authors, of which my knowledge on is kind of shaky. I think I understood about a third of all of his references, and while I was able to follow the general ideas that he was laying forth, I feel like I lost a lot of the subtext because of that. But all things considered, I still think it was a pretty good book. It was really interesting to hear more about his backstory in his life. All I've really known about him is his atheist side. I'm definitely looking forward to his other books though after this one. I think for now I'll rate this one 3.5 stars. Next up is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I absolutely loved this book. I knew nothing about it going in. I had never read John Steinbeck before, but this book was absolutely amazing. This is a 5-star book for me. I love stories that are only like 100 pages but pack just as much punch as plenty of other full-size books. If you've watched my other videos, you probably know I've been buying John Steinbeck's books just because of this one. I haven't read any of the others yet, but I'm really excited for him because if they can reach half of the level that this book has reached, they're gonna be pretty freaking great. 5 stars for Of Mice and Men. Next up, we have Saga. I had heard so many good things about this series before going in, and I found it at a thrift store for $1. But it was really disappointing. It is fine, the art is fine, the story is fine. There's a couple good jokes in here, some of the ideas are kind of cool. I feel like it's trying to be more mature than it actually is. Some of the subject matters that it tackles are not handled very well. It feels like it was written by a 14-year-old trying to be deep. If I find another copy at a thrift store, I'll probably pick up the next edition, but I'm not really looking out for it too much. I'll give Saga 2.5 stars. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This book, it was so pretentious, it really was. I hated reading this book as I was reading it. It brought me back to, when I was a 16-year-old. And that's what the book is supposed to do. It wasn't until after I finished it and I reflected on it that I was like, okay, maybe that book has a point. It's pretty good, I'll give it that. But as I was reading it, I really didn't like it. The more I think about it though, the more and more it grows on me and the more I appreciate it. Holden is such a little pathetic piece of crap in this book, and he just needs a hug. He just needs to be told that everything's gonna be okay. The second to last chapter in this book, when he's talking with his sister, really hit home for me. It really touched my heart. That was the only chapter in this book that I actually enjoyed reading as I was reading it. As I was reading it, I probably would have rated this like 2.5 stars, but looking back on it, I think it's a solid 4 stars. Next up, we have my first DNF, which was Mouse by Art Spiegelman. I know that so many people love this book, and I know that it's won a lot of awards. It did not captivate me at all in any way. The art was nothing spectacular. The story, I feel like as a Holocaust story, it should have impacted me more. Like, I've been kind of on a Holocaust kick after reading 1984 and then Anne Frank's diary, so this came up next, and I don't know if I was just burnt out from that or what, but the story had no impact on me. It was not interesting to me whatsoever, and I really don't know why. I made it about 100 pages in, there was 50 pages left, and I just didn't want to pick it up anymore. The only thing that I found kind of interesting about it at all was the father-son dynamic. That was a little interesting and kind of funny at times, but other than that, I just really didn't get anything else from it. I'm gonna give this one 2.5 stars. Next, we have The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. This book is kind of the opposite for me as Catcher in the Rye. As I was reading it, it was pretty alright. Nothing super great, but not horrible. And then after I finished it and I started reading about what other people thought about it and engaging with the community on it, that's when I started to really not like it very much. It just seems like the book is so open to interpretation. There's the obvious metaphor of overcoming adversity and sticking to your guns, but that can be interpreted in so many different ways, and people are very adamant about what they think is the right one. I do think that books belong to their readers and you can interpret it in the way that fits you, But if you're saying that that interpretation is the correct one when there's no concrete evidence to say that, I think you're overstepping. With as short as it is, I would recommend it, but if you skip it, you're not really missing anything. I'll give The Old Man and the Sea 3.5 stars. The next book I listened to was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I listened to it on Audible because they gave me a free month of membership. So this is the one I picked up because I heard a lot of good things about it, and those good things were absolutely correct. The story is full of trauma and made me kind of anxious, but it was really good. Just growing up watching iCarly and then hearing the story of what Jeanette was going through as she filmed it, and her life as a young actress and dealing with an abusive mother and a broken home, like, it was really something. It was really hard to listen to at times, but it was definitely worth the listen. It was very good. It was really inspiring to just hear her story of trying to heal after her mom died and dealing with being a celebrity and also being completely messed up. It was really something. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, 4.5 stars. Would highly recommend it. And then the next book I listened to was We Are Okay. I had this book recommended by John Green in one of his videos years ago, and I've tried to listen to it multiple times, but there's just something about the narration that just, it's not bad, but it just makes it really hard for me to pay attention to, even if I'm just sitting listening to it. Despite the fact that it was really hard for me to get into, it is such a good book. Again, it's about trauma, it's about overcoming loss and dealing with broken people and broken relationships and how to navigate that. In one sentence, I'd feel completely cozy, and then in the next sentence, I felt like my soul was being looked into. The subject matter is a little heavy at times, and it just, not that I can completely relate to the story, but the emotions that it invokes was kind of reminiscent to things I've gone through in my past and brought up a lot of memories, which I was not prepared for. I did not know that that was going to happen going into it. And I mean, I think it was for the best, but at the same time, it was just, it made this more of an experience than I wanted it to be. I'll give We Are Okay 4 stars. Next up, we have Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles. This book is about 73 years old because it was released in 1950. And you can kind of tell sometimes, but not nearly as much as I thought I was going to be able to. It does not feel nearly as dated as it is. I picked up this book because I didn't like Fahrenheit 451 when I read it a couple of years ago, and so I wanted to give Ray Bradbury another shot. So this is the one that I chose because I heard a lot of good things about it. And after this, I'm definitely going to give Ray Bradbury another shot. I'm going to reread Fahrenheit 451 because this book was fantastic. It's not set up in the way that a typical book is. There's not a main character. There's not exactly a concrete storyline that you're following. You're just following the story of Mars and the humans trying to get there, trying to live there, and a whole bunch of shenanigans that happens because of that. The book brought up a lot of interesting questions and gave me a lot of different things to think about. There are so many different elements in this book that I feel like could be expanded into a book all on their own, and I really wish that some of them had been expounded on a little bit more, because some of the things are just lightly touched on and then completely left in the dust. But altogether, I really enjoyed it, would highly recommend it, and I'm going to give this one 4.5 stars. And then another DNF is Call Us What We Carry by Amanda Gorman. I picked up this book at a thrift store because I've been wanting to read more poetry. I just really could not get into this one at all. Every time I would read a couple lines, it just felt like I was going to fall asleep. I haven't read a lot of poetry, so I can't really say whether this is specifically just this poetry collection or if it's just poetry in general. I don't know, but this one did not do it for me. I'm probably going to give this one away to someone. I don't think I'm even going to rate it just because I feel like it would be unfair for me to rate it knowing basically nothing about whether it's poetry in general or just the book. Because it is pretty highly rated as poetry, like on Goodreads and whatnot. I don't know, I just couldn't get into it. So that's everything that I read in June. And now for July, I usually don't do this, but since I'm going home, I decided to make a TBR of books that I'm going to be bringing with me. First of all, Picture of Dorian Gray. I'm already like a little bit more than a third of the way through it. I'm really enjoying it so far. We also have Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Really looking forward to this one. I think I'm going to like it a lot more than I did 1984. Hopefully. The Pearl by John Steinbeck. Again, really looking forward to reading more John Steinbeck. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. because I'm trying to get more into philosophy. And then Pet Sematary by Stephen King, because I've been trying to read more Stephen King, because I really enjoyed Misery. Like, that's the book that got me back into reading pretty much, or at least reading fiction. And then I also still need to finish The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. I wasn't able to get through it in time for the June wrap-up, but I'm pretty sure it'll make it into the July wrap-up pretty easily. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to this point in the video and you want to do algorithm things, feel free, but no pressure if you don't want to. If you have any criticism or suggestions for me, feel free to leave those down below, and if not, that's cool too. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.